Good morning. It's Jonathan Herbst, founder and CEO of Scale Up Growth Partners. Welcome again to our Stories of Scaling Up series, where we're chatting with owners, managing directors, founders, and business leaders of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies. So today I'm speaking to, and I'm going to apologise if I get the pronunciation right, Nitay-Yair Levi, who's managing director of Koenig Heritage. Welcome to the Stories of Scaling Up.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It is an absolute pleasure being here, and hello to everyone who's watching online.
I'm looking forward to this conversation, and also Nitay and I have a little bit in common in that we both went to the same university, and so there's some connections in there. So listen, let's start by, can you tell me what you do, what Koenig Heritage does, and how long have you been doing it, and where is your focus?
Sure. So I've been doing what I do now for about 15 years. It feels like I started yesterday, and I had the long hair when I started, but like yourself, the hair goes as the years
thank you very
progress. I call it wisdom. It's wisdom. So what I do, I'm the founder and managing director of a company called Koenig Heritage. Koenig Heritage essentially is a holding company, an investing company. And what we do, we buy subsidiaries. We build different groups underneath, and we buy subsidiaries. At the moment, we focus on two areas. One is safety, and one is food. And I won't elaborate too much at the moment. And because they're non-discretionary in nature, that's our investment philosophy. And essentially what we do, we provide founders with a home. Once they want to retire and they want to move the business to the next stage, we provide them that retirement capabilities, but also preserve the legacy of what they've done, often, over 50 years at times.
So to put it in my speak, you match up founders who are looking to retire, semi-retire, and not lose their business with family offices, family office investors for long-term investment. Is that fair?
Almost. So we don't do we don't sell businesses, or we're not a brokerage firm. We are buying the businesses to Koenig Heritage. Right. So when we buy a business, they become a subsidiary of Koenig Heritage, right? You are correct in saying that our shareholders base is primarily Australian and some Asian family offices. They are our shareholders base. So they invest in Koenig Heritage, and then Koenig Heritage then makes the acquisition, primarily here in Australia. And in those two groups at the moment anyway, food and safety. So whenever we meet a founder, usually from Australia, they come into the Koenig Heritage family. They become a Koenig Heritage subsidiary, which means two things. One, it depends up to them whether they want to retire straight away, or whether they want to capture a little bit more upside and go with us through the journey. We always provide the succession for them over that time. And I often find that when people want to retire, the work that they need to do in terms of creating that succession plan is too late. Yeah. Unfortunately, right? Because we're all founders, Jonathan, you included. We think we are a lions and we can live to 100, and then we're 70 all of a sudden, and we haven't even thought about the succession, and that's a big issue. Yeah.
But look, it's a really interesting point you're making. I get hired to help founders, prepare their businesses for growth, for succession, for a sale, for an event, all sorts of things. But it's fascinating when I talk to, because all of my clients are CEOs of private companies. And it's fascinating when I talk to them. One of the questions I ask very early on is, how long do you think you're going to live for? And this is a question that my coach out of America asked me early on. And I said, the average age in Australia for females is 84, average age for men is 83. My father lives to 92, my mother lived to 88. I did all those numbers. They didn't drink, they didn't smoke. When I was younger, I don't smoke anymore. Therefore, 84. And I was then challenged in a major way. Well, why? If you think about how technology is changing medicine, all of this stuff. And one of the things that being challenged by my coach, and I now challenge my clients, is that my personal purpose now is to play actively with my grandchildren. Now, that's fabulous, except but most people don't know that I'm a 62-year-old father of 8-year-olds. So therefore, to play actively, I've got to live until I'm 95. And that, all sorts of knock-on effects when it comes to my business, succession, as you say, succession planning, etc.
It's interesting that you mention that, and with your permission, I'll deviate.
Yeah, no. In fact,
on this topic,
on purpose, so please go.
Yeah. So it's fascinating what you just say, and I'm gonna give you two things. One is the statistics that most founders, at least at that age, are not aware of, and they should be aware of.
Yep.
And two is my 15 years experience on the ground of what actually happens, right? And there's no textbook for that, right? Trust me, I looked, yeah?
Yep.
This is on the ground info, but I'll start with the statistics that you probably know, but surprisingly, most founders don't know, right? And this is it. So when you come to the first generation, and usually it's the founder that you and I work with, usually, not always, but usually, they're very special people, founders, and you are one of them, and I'm one of them. We are founders. We have grit, we have resilience, we go, hell, rain, fire, we go forward, and we go with our beliefs, and that's why the businesses are so successful, right? And then you need to go, and then you want to retire, right? And I'll touch on it because this is the on the ground what I see, but let's park it for now. And this is what happens, and you probably, Jonathan, knows this already. I presume some of them don't. The transfer of what I'll start even a layer above it. Right now in Australia, we are experiencing the largest intergenerational wealth transfer from one generation to another. Not a surprise to you already know, right? Let me just repeat it. Right now in Australia, we're experiencing the largest intergenerational wealth change ever, since Australia ever existed, right? So these are incredible, the generation that really came back in the 70s into the workforce, what they built, right? And what happens is this: they're now ready to retire, right? And some of you watching, that's you, yeah? But this is the unfortunate statistics. From generation 1 to generation 2 to successfully transferring a business in this sense, there will be likelihood of 70% failure. 70% failure that your wealth will be sustained in the second generation. I won't go to the details now. That's another 2 hours of discussion.
And the third generation is even less. Yeah.
No, it's 90%. And to the fourth generation, it's 97% failure rate, which means in real life is me as a founder who has the business for 50 years or whatever time, right? 40 years. In my own lifetime, that business, the likelihood, if I don't do it right, will cease to exist. Let me just repeat this. Every day for 40 years, you wake up, you go to work, you grind, you go back home, you go back to work, you go back home, and you fight and you fight and you fight. And now you build a substantive wealth both to yourself and both to your family and both to your grandchildren. That's the blessing I have for everyone. But the business you built, there's a 90% likelihood, I'm talking about the third generation now, your grandchildren, who you will see that business will cease to exist. And it's a terrible, terrible statistics, right? Unfortunately, it's around the world. Now, there's way out of it if people like yourself will have people put the right structure in place that you cross that generational wealth transfer successfully, right? So now, knowing all of that, let's go back to what's not in the textbook. And this is well-known figures. And they talk a lot about businesses, but more about transfer of wealth from generation 1 to 2 and 3. But this is what the textbook doesn't tell you. Why does it happen? Because usually it happens too late, Jonathan. And again, I'm probably not telling you anything new, but to those who watch, I hope that adds a little bit. Right? Yeah. So this is it. What I've noticed in my 15 years of doing it is that one day a person wakes up, and usually around 70, 65, when their friend who work in jobs start to retire, because us as founders, we don't think about retirement.
That's right.
I mean, we are emotionally attached to our businesses, me included, right? And you, Jonathan, whether we like it or not, we're emotionally attached to it. And identity is defined by it. If the business does great, I feel happy. If the business doesn't do well, I don't feel happy, right? It's not a job, it's us, it's our identity. So when does this discussion about retirement started to happen? And this is the interesting part. And this is where there's no statistics. This is on the ground experience. And I've seen 1,000 founders here in Australia. This is it. There's two elements that, there's others, but there's two that kind of rule it. There's breakup of marriage, et cetera, et cetera. But the main two that I come across, and I bless everyone that it will be the second one, not the first one. what happens is this: your friends start to retire because they're in jobs, right? And then you go, oh, should I retire? No, I actually like what I do. And then you either get sick or your wife gets sick. Yeah. And I'm allowing myself to speak freely here. Usually it's some sort of cancer or heart attack or something breaks at that age, because we work very hard throughout our lives and there's a toll for us. Yeah. And to those of you who watch, the reason this is important to me, because I, in my early days, had testicular cancer. So this is something I take very personal, because I know the impact that it has when you think everything is fine and all of a sudden you get boom, you get hit. You go, oh, I just need to take a breath here. But you can't, because someone needs to go to the work every day. Otherwise, the culture is not sustained. And if you're not driving it, the business will fail, right? So you're trapped. So that's usually if there's a health issue, then a founder start to think about retirement. So I wish to anyone who's watching, including you and Jonathan, that is not what's going to happen to you. The second part, which is the more positive thing, when the thought of retirement starts to come through, is, from my experience, is when the first grandchild is born, right? The first grandchild is born, and I often see about a year and about 24 months lag, right? The first grandchild comes, and then it kind of penetrates your heart, because grandchildren and kids are wonderful. And then you start to melt and melt and melt. You're like, oh, I want to spend more time with the grandchildren. Oh, I really want to go on that trip. All this positive. And so I bless everyone that this is the reason why you want to retire, not the other one. Usually with the health, it's an immediate wish to retire, but that's not positive. So then you start talking about retirement, but guess what? You're 70 now. It's too late. You can't just quit. And usually in this type of businesses, I call it the 25 up to 25 million valuation, or above $5 million valuation. It's a value of death. Like, no one is going to buy them. It is extremely difficult to sell those businesses, because the big institutions don't want these small businesses. And mom and pop buyers who buy a coffee shop can't afford buying a business, right? So that is the value of death. And guess what? It doesn't take 2 months. It takes years to try and sell that business, from my experience anyway. So all I'm saying is, if you're planning to retire, it doesn't matter how old you are, plan now.
And it's interesting. You talk about the valleys of death. Go and have a look at my website when you get off this call. And just below the fold, I talk about the valleys of death. And
to those of you who are listening, engage Jonathan. He's very good for the record.
But it's interesting, the valleys of death, because it's on the way up and it's also on the way down. And Correct. It's all about positioning the business for you to make choices.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Another, my coach out of America, and by the way, I obviously believe in coaching, CEO, executive business coaching, and I have a coach who I pay about $10,000 US a year to. Another one of his, Dan Sullivan is his name. Another one of the things he coaches is your unique ability, what it is that you are really gifted at doing and what you really love doing. And that's where you should focus. So my business, grow remarkable leaders, grow remarkable companies. That's where my unique ability is, doing what we're doing right now, which is spreading the word to help people educate CEOs.
And Jonathan, let's talk about coaching. Sorry.
If I can just for a moment. Then surround yourself with people with unique abilities different to you. And even just this small series of scaling up. I do the interviews. All of the other stuff I've delegated to people with different unique abilities to me. The video production, the getting up on finding the people who are going to speak. And that's where I think, Nito, that your business has huge potential, because what you actually do is, when someone is looking to either exit or semi-exit, you bring those other unique abilities to balance them up, to allow them to make those decisions quicker.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I will make 2 points on what you just said, and I wholeheartedly agree with you on the coaching, right? And to those of you who listen and you're founders of businesses, this is usually, go look at the mirror and tell me whether the next statement that I am giving you applies to you, right? It's very lonely at the top. Very lonely at the top. Usually your closest friends either work for you or they go on a job. It is very lonely at the top. And once you get to that top, you're alone. So when you want to make a business decision, and mind you, most of the time you are in the business, not on the business, trying to develop it. You can't do this alone. I know we think we're lions in the savannas looking for prey, but even lions have a group around them that they call family. Coaching is critical, not just essential. If you want to grow as a human being, if you want to grow your business, have your mentors, have your coaching. That will help you look at the business, not just in the business on a regular basis. So, Jonathan, I wholeheartedly agree that coaching is critical, absolutely critical.
It's not only just business leadership mentoring. Absolutely, yeah. There's one of the best coaching things I've got. Can you see my phone? Yeah,
I can. Yeah.
This tells me how many steps I need to do today. It tells me am I getting enough sleep. Fabulous coaching device. I have a personal trainer because I'm not good at getting out and exercising 3 days a week. Sam beats me up. He's a coach in a different perspective. My wife is a coach to me in I have tax advisors, I have legal, like all of these people are coaches. But when it comes, and it's really interesting on the succession. I'm dealing with clients just now who are going through that succession from father to son or sons, and it is really hard and very frustrating for all combined. And one of the benefits I think I bring is that I make them work on the business. But it's fascinating. Your points about health and gratitude. Hold on.
To those of you who's watching, Jonathan is saying here words of gold. And Jonathan, for your credit, I am sure you don't just work on the business, because usually what happens, because the business just see, as founders, we are emotionally attached to the business. It identifies us, whether we like it or not, especially when it's 40 years of blood, sweat, and tears. It's another child. It's another you, right, in the form of the business. So the main thing that coaching does as well, beyond the business, of course, in terms of enabling the business to grow, is if we take the succession discussion, usually what happens when a founder retires, there's a void. And there's a big void that has been filled by the business itself, but that identity attachment to the business, and now it doesn't exist anymore. So then there's a void, right? And usually we see the passions come up. I always wanted to learn how to paint. And then the same energy that they devote to the business, they're not devoting to painting. And they're great, right? And it's a suppressed desires that for 40 years the business took priority to do that. But, and this is where the coaching is important, if there's no one to help you do it positively, that void will be negative. I have seen drinkings, I have seen depression, I have seen all of it. If that void is not filled correctly, then you need a coach for that. You need help to help you guide it, because it's tough, right? That can be detrimental. So it's a double-edged sword. It will either be the happiest point of your life or the saddest. That's why coaching is very important.
Thank you. And you really are spot on. But listen, I better get back to the questions. What does the future look like for the business, and what do you see as your main challenges going forward?
This is a very interesting question. What's the challenges? There's a lot of challenges at the moment. I think post-pandemic and what we're seeing now is really the inflationary environment and economic turbulence that we have at the moment, and how do we react to that? So my approach is always be defensive and put a lot of thought on how inflation, recession, economic downturn is going to impact your business. And if you haven't done it already, you should have. But if you haven't done it already, either internally or with your coach, put the right defenses against those storm, because the storm is coming. Yeah.
And what about your biggest learning as a business owner?
My biggest learning. This is an interesting one. My biggest learning. Excel spreadsheets won't make your business successful or a failure. Excel spreadsheets are a tool. Yeah, treat them like a tool. They don't define your business. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I sit in front of Excel a lot. My team sits in front of Excel a lot. It is a critical tool. And I'm using Excel here as an analogy, right? The people in your business are the most important asset you have. The biggest learning I have is find the right people and treat them like family.
Yeah.
Treat them like family because they drive the culture, they drive the customer service, they drive the sale, they drive you. Treat your employee. There's no employees. Treat your business partners as family. That's the biggest learning I have.
Great piece of advice. Great piece of advice. So when you think about the word successful, who pops to mind and why?
Let me. I think it's pretty self-evident by who's sitting behind me. To those of you who can't see, this is Warren Buffett, and not for the reasons you may think. Is he the most successful investor in the world? Of course he is, right? Is he someone I look up to? Of course he is. But the reason I like him a lot, is because he has principles. I'm not just talking about investment principles that he truly, truly believes in, right? And he is pursuing those principles. Doesn't matter what the economy does. He is walking the same talk, same path. And at bad economic times, when his performance is not well and the market laughs at him, he keeps going. He's sticking to his principles. And after 60 years, 70 years of doing that, the results are remarkable. And as business founders, we will have up and downs in our business career, if you'd like. If we stick to our foundations and keep walking the talk, we will be successful. Simple. That's why I admire this guy.
And it's interesting. I mean, I know your business is, I'll call it loosely, designed on the Buffett model. The other thing about Buffett, sorry, is that correct?
Oh, it is absolutely correct. I try and avoid the Buffettism, but I mean, it's obviously an inspiration to us what he has done, and the way we try and approach it is very conservative, very long term. No fund structures, no fees, none of that junk. Sorry for the language that I see in the market. Yes, of course, it's inspired by Warren Buffett.
Yeah, and he is a long term investor. Family is very much that focus is very much the Buffett and the Charlie Munger, his partners, focus. So these long term investments, and he gives back in extraordinary ways.
And that's my dream.
Yeah. For whatever we say about the billionaires, Buffett and Gates, they've given away half their fortune. What is it? $70 billion given back for the good of mankind.
Correct.
Pretty special. So, are you a reader? Do you listen to podcasts, blogs?
I am. Yes, of course I am. Yeah, I am. I am an avid reader. I read quite a bit, and I love the fact that I can listen to books now, right? And that in my travel time, I quite often listen to a book, audiobook, which is a fantastic way to listen, to educate yourself, even where you are on the move.
Do you have any you'd recommend?
I do, and obviously, if we're talking about investments, two of them are quite obvious. If you guys see the picture behind me, one of them is The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. I wholeheartedly recommend everyone to read it. And the other one is The Warren Buffett Way by Robert G. Hagstrom, which is a fantastic summary of how investment in my ideal world would work. And then one of the best books I love, which is about this big, is Poor Charlie Almanac, which is the story of Charlie Munger. It is an incredible read. Charlie is I don't know him personally, I wish I did. He's a character. And if you want to see a real person, no nonsense approach, that's Charlie. So that's my 3 books.
Great. And Charlie Munger, for those who don't know him, has been Warren Buffett's partner now for 60 odd years. The other thing, given that we're on a Buffett theme, it's worth searching for Warren Buffett's yearly letters to his investors. They're fabulous reads.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, about the environment, about the economy, about all sorts of things, and talking about his companies and how they are families and partnerships, and they're really must read. So, last question. Any last piece of advice or parting words to CEOs or aspiring CEOs out there?
Yeah, I do. And it's not going to be long, but hopefully it will have impact. It's one word: think. Just think about what you're doing. Sometimes it's so important to stop and say, where am I at? Yep. Is this the path that I need to be at? This is where coaching is very important. That's the checking mechanisms and that time in your diary that you can't escape. You have to go there and you have to answer the tough question. Just think. Just think. Don't just react. That's number one. And it's hard when you are in the business all the time to think all the time, right? Number two is don't follow trends. Do not follow trends. Something can be sexy and a quick money, but the overall cost over the long period of time, both to you personally and to the business, is huge. Don't follow trends. Follow sustainable returns and stability. Sustainable returns and stability. Whatever products range, for example, you want to sell, choose those ones that have sustainable returns and stability for your business over the long term, right? And the last and most important thing, and I touched on it before, is be a human first. People think they have this image that a businessman is, the tired, you go like this and aggressive. No, it doesn't work like that. Your people around you need to be able to trust you. Be a human first. If you're human, your business will be very successful.
That is great advice. Thank you. And we'll wrap it up there. Nito, thank you so much. I've enjoyed our conversation, obviously.
My pleasure. I hope that's what we are looking for.
Absolutely. And we'll speak soon.
Okay, thank you very much.